The chamber was tense. Jasmine Crockett spoke for struggling families and exhausted workers. Then Barron cut her off with a sharp declaration: "Non-Americans are not allowed here to talk." A heavy silence fell until Jasmine asked one question that turned the hearing upside down, leaving him speechless, shuffling papers, and walking away. The United States Congress chamber is not just a room. It is a stage where history has been written and rewritten countless times. The tall ceilings echo with the voices of leaders past, the polished wooden desks, the long rows of seats, the weight of the flag at the front, all are silent witnesses to battles fought with words instead of weapons. On this particular day, the chamber felt different. The air was heavy. There was a hush, the kind of silence that makes people lean forward in their chairs, sensing something monumental is about to happen. Staff members carried folders and whispered hurriedly, but their footsteps seemed to tread more softly than usual. Everyone knew this hearing would be anything but ordinary. At the center of attention was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Known for her sharp intellect and fearless oratory, she entered the chamber with a steady, purposeful stride. She wasn't there for political games. She was there to give voice to the problems crushing everyday Americans: soaring grocery prices, families living paycheck to paycheck, parents juggling multiple jobs just to keep the lights on. She came prepared not only with facts and figures, but with a palpable fire in her voice. For her, this wasn't another performance. It was a sacred chance to amplify the voices of people far from the marble walls of Washington, voices that were too often ignored. Jasmine took her seat, adjusted her microphone, and waited, a portrait of focused readiness. Around her, lawmakers settled in, some leaning back with arms crossed, others already scribbling notes, all curious about what would unfold. But she was not the only figure drawing eyes that day. Across the chamber, a single name rippled through the whispers: Barron Trump. The youngest of his famous family, he was tall and outwardly composed, carrying a last name that had dominated American politics for nearly a decade. For the first time, he was stepping out from the long shadow of being merely the son of. This was his carefully orchestrated debut, his opportunity to prove he possessed a political voice of his own. Every move, every glance was scrutinized. He was not just another new face, he was a symbol of legacy, raw power, and immense expectation. His presence posed a single, unspoken question: could he bear the weight of his name in the nation's most demanding arena? The atmosphere grew taut. The contrast between the two was stark. On one side stood Jasmine Crockett, fiery, grounded, and determined to spotlight America's real and urgent struggles. On the other sat Barron Trump, a newcomer to the stage, yet already radiating an aura of inherited entitlement, as if the chamber was his rightful domain. As the hearing prepared to start, a subtle electricity crackled in the air, the charged quiet that precedes a storm. Lawmakers shifted in their seats. Staffers' eyes darted back and forth. Cameras tightened their focus. Every person in the room understood this was not a routine discussion. It was a showdown in the making, written plainly in their body language. Jasmine sat upright and steady, her eyes scanning her notes, her posture telegraphing readiness. Barron leaned back slightly, his jaw tight, as if mentally rehearsing his entry into this world of high-stakes rhetoric. For Jasmine Crockett, this was about representation: the single mother choosing between rent and medicine, the factory worker fearing a pink slip, the graduate drowning in debt. For Barron Trump, it was about validation, proving he could step into his father's arena and command attention on his own terms. It was more than politics, it was a clash of legacy versus grit, inherited fame versus earned fire. The gavel struck, its echo a drumbeat announcing the start. Jasmine Crockett leaned into her microphone, poised to speak. She did not know it yet, but her words would trigger a chain of events that would wrench the spotlight from Barron Trump's much-hyped debut and fix it squarely upon her. And Barron, equally unaware, would see his first step into Congress, and not with applause, but in a retreat that would define the day. The stage was set. The players were ready. The silence was about to be shattered. The sound of the gavel still hung in the air as Jasmine Crockett began. Her tone was steady yet urgent, a voice that commanded the room. She did not recite a cold list of statistics. She painted vivid, heartbreaking pictures. She spoke of families in grocery aisles, calculators in hand, deciding which necessities to put back. She described parents kissing their children goodnight before heading to a second job, and the quiet despair in towns where factories had gone silent. Her words were not polished for a soundbite. They were raw, heavy with the weight of lived reality. As she spoke, the very walls seemed to listen. Some lawmakers leaned forward, nodding slowly. Others maintained flat expressions, but could not conceal how her message cut through the usual noise. Even staffers paused their note-taking to glance her way. Jasmine Crockett had the floor, and she was using every second to its fullest. Then it happened. From across the chamber, Barron Trump shifted. His tall frame straightened, and with a sharp, deliberate motion, he leaned into his microphone. His voice was firm, clipped, and dripping with condescension. Non-Americans are not allowed here to talk. The words sliced through the room like a blade. For a heartbeat, time froze. Papers stopped mid-shuffle. Pens hovered over notepads. Lawmakers turned in unison, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. It was more than a challenge. It was a blatant dismissal, an attempt to invalidate her very right to speak. The silence that followed was thick and loaded, like the air before a lightning strike. Jasmine Crockett did not move at first. She sat perfectly still, hands resting on the table, her gaze fixed ahead. She did not flinch, but within that quiet, the magnitude of the attack resonated. Barron's words were not subtle. They were a weapon, designed to wound and to smother the fire of her testimony in a single, sweeping blow. In that moment, two realities collided. One showed Barron Trump, emboldened by his name, confident he had seized control of the room with a mere sentence. The other revealed Jasmine Crockett, a seasoned fighter tested in battles far tougher than this. She did not react impulsively. Instead, she let the silence stretch, allowing the arrogance of his statement to hang in the air like acrid smoke. That silence proved more powerful than any outburst. It forced everyone to lean closer, to wait with bated breath. Staffers exchanged nervous glances. Some lawmakers smirked, thinking Barron had scored a point. Others frowned, knowing Crockett was not one to stay down. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression. Barron sat back, a thin, satisfied line where his lips had been. His posture declared victory. This was his opening punch. But punches only land if the opponent doesn't know how to take a hit. And Jasmine Crockett had built a career on getting back up. The silence was about to break. She adjusted her microphone slowly, deliberately, a soft scrape that echoed in the hush. It was a gesture that said, "I heard you. And now, you will hear me." The chamber held its breath. Would she defend her right to be there? Would she counter with anger? What came next was none of those things. It was sharper, smarter, and it flipped the entire moment on its head. While Barron thought he had set a trap, Jasmine was about to spring one of her own. And when she finally spoke, it would not be a rebuttal, but a question so perfectly aimed that Barron Trump's debut would begin to unravel before the eyes of the nation. The air was wire-tight, the tension unbearable. Everyone leaned in as Jasmine Crockett finally leaned forward, ready to speak. The chamber remained locked in a profound silence. Barron Trump's words, "Non-Americans are not allowed here to talk," still lingering like a foul odor. It was a bold, brash attempt to cut her down. But Jasmine did not flinch. She sat immobile, her hands folded calmly, her eyes locked on Barron with the unblinking focus of a predator. For a long, excruciating moment, she said nothing, and that silence became a weapon of its own. The tension in the room grew palpable with every passing second. Lawmakers fidgeted. Staffers dared not write a word. Cameras pushed in for a closer shot, awaiting the counterpunch. Barron leaned back, the faintest hint of a smirk playing on his lips. In his mind, the first blow was his. He had entered the arena and swung. The smirk taunted, "Your move." And Jasmine Crockett moved. She leaned forward with glacial slowness, adjusting her microphone. The faint electronic scrape echoed in the stillness, a sound that promised a response. Her voice, when it came, was calm, dangerously calm. "Congressman Trump," she began, her eyes narrowing to slits. "You're so keen on defining who belongs here. So, let me ask you a question about belonging." She paused, letting the anticipation peak. "Tell me, is Ivanka your sister or your mother?" The words detonated in the room like a thunderclap. A collective, audible gasp swept through the chamber. Lawmakers whipped their heads around so fast it rustled fabric. Staffers froze, mouths agape. For a second, even the microphone seemed to amplify the shock. The question was brutal in its simplicity. It was not about policy or procedure. It was a surgical strike at the very core of his public identity, the tangled, highly publicized familial dynamics that were his inheritance. It stripped away his polished posture and smug smirk, forcing him to confront a personal labyrinth he had no prepared answer for. His face transformed. The smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of stunned confusion that hardened into tight-lipped anger. His jaw clenched. His hands twitched, fingers crumpling the edges of his prepared notes. He tried to form a word, but nothing came. Finally, he managed a strangled, defensive mutter. "I'm not here to discuss my family." It was weak. It was evasive. It was the antithesis of the confident air he had meant to project. The silence that followed was louder and more damning than before. Crockett did not press. She didn't need to. One question had turned the room. She settled back in her chair, her gaze still fixed on him, utterly composed. Her punch had landed with devastating precision. Barron, meanwhile, completely unraveled. His composure evaporated. He shuffled his notes pointlessly, straightened them, then shuffled them again, a restless, telling fidget. He glanced around for support, but found only averted eyes. Lawmakers studied their desks or pretended to write. No one would meet his look. Finally, he broke. His voice was lower, rushed, edged with panic. "This is a waste of the committee's time. I have pressing business elsewhere." It was a transparent, rehearsed exit line. It made him look smaller, not in control. He pushed back his chair, the legs screeching against the floor in a jarring protest. He gathered his papers in a clumsy bundle, avoiding every eye: Jasmine's, his colleagues', the cameras. He stood, and despite his height, he seemed diminished, exposed. Muttering something inaudible, he turned and strode toward the door. The heavy door closed behind him with a final, hollow thud. He was gone. The chamber erupted into a low, buzzing hum of disbelief. No winner needed to be declared. The sight of his retreat, defeated not by a mob but by a single, incisive question, was answer enough. Jasmine Crockett did not raise her arms in triumph. She didn't smile. She simply sat back, her expression steady, her eyes calm, radiating a silent message: this is what it means to hold your ground. For Barron, this was to be the dawn of his political voice. Instead, it ended in a flight everyone would remember. For Jasmine Crockett, it was the moment she demonstrated that in the theater of power, a single, perfectly placed question can echo louder than the longest speech. The heavy door sealed Barron Trump's exit, the sound a definitive period to the encounter. Inside, a stunned stillness held the room. Lawmakers sat frozen, some staring at the vacant doorway, others stealing glances at Jasmine, who remained a pillar of calm. The silence was dense with unprocessed shock. Then, the whispers began, a soft, spreading ripple of realization. What they had witnessed was not standard political theater. It was a rare, defining moment. Jasmine Crockett did not speak. Her composure was her statement. It told the room she hadn't just won a point, she had faced down a Goliath of inherited influence, and not budged an inch. Across the chamber, reactions varied. Some lawmakers whispered in disbelief, eyes wide. Others scribbled frantic notes, trying to capture history in real time. A few sat stony-faced, hiding their thoughts behind masks of neutrality. But the energy had irrevocably shifted. An older senator, a veteran of countless partisan battles, let out a low, appreciative whistle. A young staffer pressed a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp of awe. The tension had snapped, replaced by a mix of shock and newfound respect. Barron's exit was meant to look like a dignified departure. The chamber saw it for what it was, a retreat. They saw a man who entered with a swagger, only to be dismantled by a query that exposed the fragility beneath the famous name. In politics, perception is the only currency that matters, and his had just been devalued. Jasmine, still seated, gently adjusted her microphone again. The small sound drew every eye back to her. She offered no gloating smile. Instead, she resumed speaking with the same measured, serious tone she had begun with. She guided the room's focus back from the spectacle to the substance, to the American people, the families, the workers, the fears she had catalogued. It was a masterful recentering. While Barron had tried to make the moment about nationality and exclusion, Jasmine made it about inclusion and the people's pressing needs. As she spoke, she held the room captive. She had not only survived an attack, she had reclaimed the narrative entirely. Outside that chamber, one could already imagine the ripples spreading, clips viral on social media, headlines being written, the story told and retold. Inside, the atmosphere had changed. The air was clearer, though still charged with the aftershock of what had transpired. A young aide leaned to her neighbor and whispered, "They'll teach this in political strategy classes." Her neighbor could only nod, eyes fixed on Crockett. One truth was now evident. Jasmine had done far more than defend herself. She had showcased a formidable combination of intellect, poise, and tactical brilliance. Barron's retreat was not his alone to manage, it was her decisive victory. Lawmakers who may have previously underestimated her now regarded her with a sharp, recalculating attention. The chamber itself, steeped in history, had just witnessed a new chapter being written. Jasmine Crockett closed her remarks with a final, resonant principle. Her voice was calm, but carried immense weight. "Real leadership," she said, "is not about deciding who gets to speak. It is about having the courage to listen, especially to those we've conditioned ourselves not to hear." The words hung, undeniable, in the quiet room. As the gavel fell to end the session, a single thought crystallized for all present: Jasmine Crockett had not merely held her ground. She had transformed an attempted dismissal into her most powerful defining moment. The fallout would not be limited to Barron's wounded pride. It would be a seismic shift in perception, a redrawing of lines, proving that in that hallowed chamber, A sharp mind and a fearless voice could still triumph over a heavy name. The session was over. Lawmakers filed out in hushed clusters, but the energy of the confrontation lingered, unforgettable. Jasmine remained for a moment, organizing her papers with a tranquil precision that stood in stark contrast to Barron's frantic exit. Her calm alone narrated the story. She arrived prepared, and she left unshaken. Though Barron Trump had departed, his absence now spoke only of her presence. Outside, the hallway buzzed with frantic energy. Staffers compared notes in hushed tones. Reporters scrambled for comment. The echoing question, "Is Ivanka your sister or your mother?" was already spreading, a viral emblem of a stunning political reversal. For Jasmine, the meaning transcended the moment. This was bigger than a personal clash. It was a testament every watching American could understand. She had stood not just for herself, but for the families choosing between food and fuel, for the workers clinging to shaky jobs, for all who have ever been made to feel they do not belong. Her response was clever, yes, but its power was symbolic. She defended the fundamental right of the overlooked to demand to be heard. This is where the story meets you, the viewer. How often have you seen power used to dismiss and exclude? In a meeting, a classroom, a community board? That moment under the Capitol dome was a microcosm of a universal struggle, the fight between those who silence and those who refuse to be silent. Jasmine's strength becomes a mirror. It is a reminder that when pushed toward the margins, the most powerful reply is not always a shout, but a question so precisely aimed it dismantles the premise of the attack. Her calm was her strategy. Her words were her armor. Now consider the impact. Millions replaying that simple, devastating question. It was a query that tore down a facade, forced a stumble, and revealed a profound truth about the emptiness of unearned arrogance. Beyond the personal drama, Jasmine's victory carried a message for our time. Leadership cannot be inherited like property. It is earned through listening, through truth-telling, and through standing firm when the ground shakes. And here is your invitation to this story. Jasmine Crockett's stand only gains its full meaning if people see their own reflections in it. If they recognize that the clash in that chamber mirrors the quiet battles in their own lives for respect, for dignity, for a seat at the table. Her win was not solitary, it was collective. Every time someone pushes back against being silenced, it makes space for others to find their voice. So, what do you think? Was this more than a heated debate? Was it a clear glimpse into what happens when unexamined power meets prepared truth? Consider Barron's exit, the flimsy excuse, the echoing footsteps, the void he left behind. That was not strength. It was a retreat, and retreat reveals a crucial weakness, that even the most imposing legacy can crumble under the weight of a single, truthful question. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett did not just remain seated. She reclaimed the agenda. She reminded everyone that the real stakes, the struggles of ordinary people, will always matter more than political theater or family dynasties. And therein lies her true, enduring victory, not in the humiliation of an opponent, but in the relentless redirecting of the spotlight back to where it has always belonged, on the people. Now the reflection passes to you. Do you see this as a turning point? Do you see in Jasmine Crockett someone who carried a piece of your story into that hall and refused to let it be dismissed? Or do you see it as merely another skirmish in an endless war? Her question ended Barron Trump's moment, but her message that is very much alive. It is waiting for your response. So let's hear it. What do you think?